Welcome back. I'm Alfred Lambrot Weber, and today we have an extraordinary guest coming to us from Netcusp, British Columbia. Did I pronounce that correct?
Yes, I think you did a really great job.
Oh, good. And that's Marcia Pavlis. And uh, I've seen Marcia's resume, and she has an extraordinary resume as an investment advisor with HSBC Securities. I guess up until a certain point where I think you had to stop work, but you'll tell us about that. But she's here to tell us about her experience with Morgellons
Yes,
and with some of the causes, but importantly with the cover-up,
yes.
with what her attempts with the government of Canada have been, and with her lawsuit, because this can be instructive to many people throughout the world. So welcome. Marcia, please launch right into it and tell us about your experience with Morgellons, its cause, the cover-up, what the government of Canada, your attempts have been, and with the lawsuit, and with the future from here on in.
Okay, first of all, what I'd like to say is that I became extremely ill in about the year 2000. And I could go back as early as the early 80s. In the early 80s, I came down with chronic fatigue symptoms, which were extraordinary. Then in the early 90s, I started to get neurological symptoms. And then in the year 2000 is when, looking back, I'd have to say that I actually got Morgellons symptoms, which include the appearance of fibers which appear to have intelligence of their own. They seem to be operating from some sort of intelligence. And so I made the usual attempts to try to get help from doctors. And being a professional in my profession, I expected to be treated according to that. And I soon found out that I had any credibility whatsoever. I was treated with the most, what I would say, disrespect and lack of respect for my intelligence, and also the intelligence of the professionals whom I presented to these doctors. And so after many years of not getting any help from doctors and actually suffering from their abuse on top of the regular symptoms, because what happens is you're no longer taken seriously about any medical issue that you have, and also you are ostracized from society and labeled as having a mental illness that you don't have. And so your actual physical symptoms, and in Western medicine, they collect physical samples and use, medical tests to determine things. All of a sudden, you're not worthy of that type of medicine. And so it's a very long and lonely battle. So what happens to a person is they land up seeking help from other people that have similar symptoms. And since I was active on the internet since about 1996 or so, that's where I went. I went onto the internet. And at first I had received a diagnosis of fibromyalgia. And so I landed up on a fibromyalgia bulletin board with other patients who also had received a similar diagnosis. And if a person is aware of fibromyalgia, it's my understanding that it is just a label for a set of symptoms for which they don't know the cause of. And so even though it has a label, the cause of it is unknown. And so after the fibromyalgia bulletin board, a lot of those patients also had fibers, okay, these similar fibers, and also had similar symptoms. And that led me to various other bulletin boards. And finally, I got onto a bulletin board back, and I've got the dates down here. It began on August 30th of 2006, and I was on there until it was shut down February of 2008. And the bulletin board is no longer open. It was shut down by the administrators. It was their decision, and it was called Biology Online. And the bulletin board topic was called fiber disease. And that's the name that Morgellons actually went by originally, was fiber disease. And this goes back to 2005. And in 2005, in October, a scientist joined the board in October, and he is the same scientist who reported the cause of what he called silent superbug. Okay, so that's another name. That's the official name that he used on the bulletin board. Later on, he named it something else, which is more of a scientific term. Okay, now I belonged to that bulletin board, so I was active on it and active with this scientist. And he was actually trying to help us. He was really trying to help us. Now, at the time, back then, on these internet bulletin boards, we didn't know anything about disinformation agents and, you know, people that were trying to sabotage your group and sabotage the truth from getting out. But in hindsight, that's exactly what was going on. And dissent grew amongst the group. And people couldn't join together for trying to unite to get anything done. But all of the information that he was trying to get out was on that bulletin board. And the information was archived, okay? Many of us that were active, there was a handful that are still around that were active on that board, saved all of his postings from that bulletin board on our computers. Excuse me, because we knew it was very important. After the bulletin board was closed down, he opened up a blog spot, you know, one of the Google blog spots, and it was actually named Silent Superbug. And he had that blog spot going for about 4 or 5 years, and there was a massive amount of information on that blog spot. And then all of a sudden, a few years ago, the blog spot just disappeared altogether. And excuse me, lucky for us, another lady actually had retrieved all of the script from that blog spot, but not all of the images. And so this person actually had just, I've gone through all of these saved documents, postings, and studied them up as best that I could. And he reported the cause of silent superbug to the ECDC, the CDC, and Interpol in France twice in August of the year 2004. And he sent them the videos, which are called Silent Superbug Video or Silent Superbug, by FedEx along with these reports. And he wrote that he received a response almost immediately back from the ECDC, notifying him that he had identified what they called a major potential threat. Okay? And so he received a letter back from them, but he did not receive anything back from Interpol in France or the CDC. Now, at the time, the director or one of the head people or the actual head person at the CDC was a lady named Julia Gerberding. So if there was a cover-up, which I'm pretty certain there was, she is fully aware of it. And he mentioned her name more than once. Now, in hindsight, this lady is also the same lady who is involved in the cover-up of the cause of autism in Black children being known to be the measles, mumps, rubella vaccination.
Could you state her name again, please?
Julia Gerberding.
Could you spell her last name, please?
Gerberding.
Thank you.
And it was exactly around the same time. I believe, in hindsight, this cover-up at the CDC about the autism was in the same year, 2004. So she was there and at both times, okay? So after she left the CDC, it was the same year, as far as I know. Let me just put it this way. The incident at the CDC, I'd have to look it up. I might be a little bit confused about the dates and the times, but she would have been involved in both. Because after she was head of the CDC in the United States, she went on to be head of vaccinations at Merck. Okay, so that, I believe, is her present position now. And it was a threefold salary increase, I believe. I've done a little bit of research into that. And so now that's the gist of the cover-up as far as what I know. And I am not a scientist and I am not a lawyer, but there's obviously a cover-up here, okay? Now, when you realize how the doctors are treating the patients, okay, and that there's obviously they're in denial of something that's actually physical, okay? When you bring in a microscope to your doctor to show them that something is real and can be observed under the microscope, and your doctor writes in your medical report that you're actually suffering from a mental illness because you look into microscopes, is utterly bordering on insanity. Okay, and this is the type of thing that happens. And so what I did here in Canada is I gathered together all the research that there was in a big, huge binder. Because I'm organized, I'm professional, I'm intelligent, I can put things together to present a case, to prove my point, ask for specific medical tests, ask for specific biopsies, and you're getting refused again and again. Since I'd already had a diagnosis of fibromyalgia, and I had learned about mycoplasma mycoplasmas causing a lot of harm to people, I wrote to one of the experts on that, or what I would consider to be the expert, and that is Dr. Garth Nicholson in the United States from his company called iMed. And I wrote to him after the silent superbug videos were released to the public. And I believe that was in 2005 or 2006. And Dr. Garth Nicholson is known for his research into Gulf War syndrome and mycoplasmas, as well as many, many, many other things. His curriculum vitae alone is 70 pages long. And I couldn't even get a doctor with 3 specialties to write this man, okay, who I had already written about the silent superbug videos and received a response from, that he was very disturbed by the contents of the video, and he did not disagree that these were the cause of these and many illnesses, and that this was included a mixing, if you want to say, I'm not using his words here, but putting it into my words, a mixing of the species, I forget what it's called, but the main domains of life on the planet. And so when you look back and you fill in all the dots, it all starts to make perfect sense. And also the reason for covering it up. Some sort of a biological release that was an accident, that you can't stop, that self-replicates, that self-assembles and grows and spreads at a dramatic rate. What are you going to do? How are you going to stop it? You know? And so the efforts that I made were, not only did I write a lot of these specialists around the world and gathered their letters and all of this together, but at the same time was continuing to go to specialists and doctors, and absolutely nobody would listen to me. And the psychological effect of that is very traumatic on a person. You begin to be rejected wherever you go. It's like you have a big red mark on your medical file. And so I decided that the best thing to do was to start, the only way I would get any medical help would be to initiate a lawsuit. Well, I wasn't going to initiate a lawsuit to try to prove Morgellons, to try to prove that I got Morgellons from chemtrails. I really knew it was a hopeless cause, because how do I tell that I got a fiber from a chemtrail? Which cloud was it on which day? And how do I know that that came from that airplane? And how did it possibly land on me? And how did I know it? You know, and or which glass did you drink? What did you drink, Marcy? What day was it when you got it? Which hamburger did you eat? Which piece of bread? You know, which bug bit you on which day, and how did you possibly know it was that bug? So there's no way that you could possibly prove how you got it, right? The only thing that you could do with the doctors is basically try to sue them for their neglect of treating you for your actual physical symptoms, and for actually neglecting you. And through this neglect, this has spread to many, many more people. It actually is something that is able to be spread. And so what I did is I had the answer back from Dr. Garth Nicholson. I knew I shouldn't look like I don't have any backing behind me with regard to the videos and what was written. And so I began to write the authorities. I wrote to the BC Chief Medical Officer here in British Columbia. I wrote to the Minister of Health for British Columbia. I wrote to the Premier of the province of British Columbia, and I eventually wrote to the Prime Minister of Canada. And what I learned is that with regard to major health outbreaks, Canada takes its direction from the American CDC. They take their direction. The CDC in Canada is nothing but, just they don't really have any authority or do anything. They just check with the CDC in the States. Oh, okay, well, they say it's nothing to worry about, so we're good to go. That's literally what they do. I can assure you that the Prime Minister of Canada and the Premier care absolutely nothing, zero, about bioterrorism, okay? Because I reported this to them. I had backup of all of these authorities, and I couldn't get a single intelligent response, okay? So I know that the Prime Minister of Canada trying to bring in new laws to protect Canadians against anything like this is nothing but a sham. You try to report a bio incident, you can't get anybody to test your home for this material. You can't. You can't get anybody to test your food. At one time when I was living in Victoria, I actually got this in Victoria when I was living and working there. There was a melamine substance that was found in the pet food, and there was a big scandal, and they were testing all the pet food for melamine. And at that exact same time, I couldn't get anybody to test my food for melamine or anything else. And so before you know it, you realize you're being treated worse than a dog. You can't get your food tested, your place tested. You can't get any government official to take you seriously. You can't get any medical help. The only thing you can possibly do is help yourself. That's all you can possibly do. And I'll get into that a bit later, but so I did begin a lawsuit, and I withdrew my consent to have that lawsuit heard. Okay. And I withdrew my lawsuit because from the time between when I initiated it, I'd already found out that through another matter that the courts were corrupt to the absolute core, and I knew that there was absolutely no point whatsoever in going forward. There would be no justice for me or for anybody else.
Can I ask, were you the only plaintiff?
Yeah, the only plaintiff.
And who did you sue in that lawsuit?
I have a list. I don't have the names right with me on my paper, but I have the list of the doctors who were involved in what I would say the iatrogenic neglect. And there were at least 7, maybe 9 names on there. Also involved with this was the lawyer. If there's further action down the road, which I wrote about, that this should be tried in Nuremberg. This is a crime against humanity, okay? And it's been covered up. It's been covered up. And so the doctors are involved in causing more harm to humanity, okay, because of their absolute and utter neglect, refusal to look at these things. And so as far as any lawsuit goes, this has to do with an incident that is of very extreme importance to human life. People are actually being genetically altered by this organism which was made in a laboratory involved in proteomic and genomic research. At the time, this goes back to 1979. According to this scientist, it was released 5 times between 1979 and the year 2000. And I can just tell you from my recent interviews, I started a support group on Facebook, and I'm interviewing a bunch of new patients. And I can tell you already, I see a new pattern evolving of patients that just got this in the year 2010. So I wouldn't doubt that they've released whatever this is again, once more. So I hope I'm being, clear. If there's any question.
This is very, very clear.
So the name of the scientist is Daniel Bell-Veneden, and I don't know where he is. I don't know how to contact him.
Daniel Bell.
Van Eden, Vaneeden. I believe it's one word.
Van.
Eden, like Garden of Eden.
Van Eden.
Yeah, that he was residing in the Netherlands at the time, and there was apparently an outbreak of this in the Netherlands as well. Okay. Now, through recently, and this is one of the reasons I wanted to get this out and wanted to contact you, I was trying to find somebody somewhere that might know the scientist, where he is, if he's still alive, if we can get a hold of him or get a hold of this letter that he received back from the ECDC. And I ran into a man on YouTube, on my Morgellons Cover-Up YouTube channel. Now, his name is David Griffin. You know of him, I'm sure, of the UK Exopolitics.
Yes.
And he knows this man personally. He knew of him back then in this year, 2004, 2006. And he knows him personally, and I've been trying to get a hold of him. We just haven't been able to hook up.
You mean you haven't been able to get hold of David Griffin? Or
That's right, David Griffin.
Well, we can help do that.
Yeah. So David was from David's videos, and that's how David actually contacted me about my goo video. I made a goo video, the results from the ionic foot bath. And he was making connections with the black oil substance and the Falklands War of 1982. And I was making videos, is Morgellons the gray goo? Because I'd already been familiar with Robert Freitas and the gray goo scenario. And this is a substance that is self-assembling, self-replicating, which gets released on the planet and takes over the planet, okay? So this black oil substance, what I gathered from the David Griffin interviews, was in 1982, during the Falklands War, this substance was located down there near the Falklands. I don't know how or much about it. And some of this substance, which was black, was transported to the UK for further investigation and study. Now, the interesting thing that hit me about that was when the Falklands War was going on, exactly at that time, I was on a cruise ship in the Caribbean, right when it was going on. And as I said, I can trace my symptoms back to the very early 80s when I began to have symptoms. I got a rash back in the early 80s. I started to get chronic fatigue. It was a different type of rash, not the same thing, but they couldn't figure out what that was either, and I thought it was from an insect bite. Now, this is all to do with the cover-up. As far as I'm concerned, you can catch or you can get this through the air, through the food, because anybody with Morgellons, it's everywhere. It's flying all over the place. And so it's got to be in the food supply. It's got to be in the water supply. It's more than likely coming from the chemtrails is one thing, or the chemtrails may just be because they have something like the gray goose scenario going on, and they are trying to kill it because it's self-replicating and it's self-assembling. It is literally like a little machine. And so this substance at the base architecture, Alfred, is a cyanobacteria. Okay? Now, cyanobacteria is basically a slime mold. And we know that slime molds have intelligence. They can actually be programmed. Okay? A slime mold can be programmed. It has intelligence. And it spreads rapidly, very rapidly. So they took that, but they altered it. They altered that base material. Then they took that and they fused it with another altered base material. And this type of fusion could only occur in certain laboratories that had this special equipment to do this technology. Okay? So I've been trying to get this story out for a long time, but what happens is you don't have the complete story. You know, you've got this bit, you get this in this year, the next year you get this, the next year you get this, and then you go back and you think you've got all the pieces, and then another piece will come out. And so this is what has been happening. And so most recently, I don't know if you've heard of Clifford Carnicom.
Oh, I know Clifford.
Okay. And I've looked into Clifford's research that he has done. And in one of his articles, he indicated that what he is now calling a cross-domain bacteria, okay, which is what I meant by the crossing of the four major domains of life. Okay, so he's not in denial that this is a cross-domain substance. So that agrees with the scientist who reported it. Okay, and so with regard to what Clifford Carnicom was in his research, the reason we're all so tired all the time, and I'm talking about when you get the actual full-blown Morgellons, you could be sleeping 16 hours a day. Like, you can already stay up for 3 or 4 hours. And so in Clifford's research, he said that this cross-domain bacteria was eating our iron. Well, if it's eating our iron up, well, it explains why we're tired all the time, doesn't it? Now, and I got to tell you some other connections I've been making. I do have a lady who is helping me most recently, or helping us. I ran into her through an interview that she gave with the lady from Camelot.
Carrie Cassidy.
Yeah, Carrie Cassidy. And the lady who she interviewed is named Zoe Huang from Hong Kong. And so I contacted Zoe Huang in Hong Kong in early December. And she had offered her help because she's a starseed and she wants to help human beings, right? With their health and that sort of thing. So the reason she was being interviewed by Carrie Cassidy had to do with decoding the Ebola gene sequence for the Ebola virus. So she knew how to decode the gene sequence, and she said she just learned it on her own. So I thought, she's willing to help. I knew I had the gene sequence already for silent superbug because the scientist, Daniel Bell Van Eden, had posted it on his blog spot years ago, and many of us saved it. Okay, he actually had the actual gene sequence. So I wrote to Zoe Huang and I provided her with the gene sequence, okay, in early December. She was able to decode it really quickly, and she said right away it was genetically modified, and it showed that the thymine portion of the DNA in us, the Morgellons organism, which is a cross-domain species. I wouldn't call it a bacteria myself, but it's cross-domain. And that in order for us to get healed, we won't get healed until we unclump thymine, which is too many together. Okay, the sequences, like, you'll have AA or TT. Well, this goes TT, TT, and it shouldn't go like that. It should go TT and then something else. Excuse me. So she's helping me and us, okay? And she has recommended a certain type of treatment to try. And she's saying that we are going to need a specific light frequency, not sound, but light. And she's recommended an ultraviolet B narrowband phototherapy of a nanometer 311, and only bulbs by Philips, and to check with your doctor first because she wants people to, get the proper usage of this phototherapy. And so what I did in early December was I started to try to raise some money for a full body unit, ultraviolet booth to try to cure me. And if it cures me, it will cure other people too. Now, what she suggested was don't go to that expense first because, you might not work, right? So to try a small handheld unit first. So that's what I did. I bought it's like a 6-inch handheld unit. And very difficult to use because Morgellons isn't on one part of your body, it's everywhere, because it is the infiltration of a particular matter which is everywhere in the body. So you can't just do your face, you've got to do the whole outside. Now, already with this little bit of treatment that I used, I could feel it working on my inside. I can't really describe it, but on my actual organs, okay? And, but after 7 tries of only using this light, and I mean, you start at like 15 seconds, 30 seconds, and the maximum time under these lamps is 3 minutes. That's how powerful they are. And so the lamp actually broke. The little lamp I bought to try. So there's some hope, is what I'm saying. Now with this lady trying to help us. I just need to grab a little bit of water.
Sure. I understand that part of the symptoms is that
it's like it affects the neck and it affects the voice and the throat. And so I often have trouble.
Sure. No. Use as much water as you need, please.
So that is what I really wanted to get out about the basic cover-up, okay? Now, with regard to people saying, what is the purpose of it? Okay, I have my own theory about that, and that again has come together with a recent interview that I watched. I should say it's a recent video, an article that I read about an older interview. And the interview was with a person that calls themselves a hybrid person. Okay. Many of the people, patients in the Morgellons community, we try to find out what we have in common. Why us, right? Why us? Why are we the ones with all these symptoms? And a lot of us seem to think it's our background, our genetic background, our actual DNA. And many of us, even though we don't necessarily have Rh negative blood in us, we have it in our family, like our mother, for example. Like my mother had Rh negative blood.
Mm-hmm.
So the transhuman agenda came out, the Russia 2045 project, Ray Kurzweil, etc., talking about creating basically a human body made out of nanodots. Would look exactly like a human, but it's made out of nanodots. It's not a real human, but it's like a replica. And there's been a lot of information about the Morgellons spreads like a network under the skin and throughout the body. And many people have thought that it's a network to connect us to something, okay? And it goes along with the idea of singularity, this one hive mind, everybody connected via Wi-Fi to the main big computer, the internet, the big, huge library, right? And so there's all kinds of theories out there about that, and I don't think we should dismiss any of them. But in this interview, she talks specifically about the Rh negative factor and why she was selected to be a hybrid, okay? And it had something to do with them attaching a draconian consciousness which cannot exist on its own, like it doesn't have a body, okay? It needs to occupy a body, okay, which is an Rh negative. So it couldn't attach to anybody that has no Rh negative in them. Like they never had any in their background. It couldn't attach to their genetics, okay? So in this interview, she said she was talking again about iron, okay? Something to do with iron, also something to do with radiation, that also these draconian type, or these hybrids, or not the hybrids, but the hybrids actually gained the ability to have radiation be something good for them, whereas it's bad for us. And so when I put that together with that interview, and I just put a little video out about that on my channel, it seems to connect the idea of taking over, you know, like it's bad enough we have a reptilian brain, but apparently this, what she's calling draconian consciousness, is actually attaches itself to the nervous system of these hybrid beings. So when you put it all together, you know, you begin to think, okay, we know this was made in a lab, but just because, like, that's my opinion, I'm pretty sure it was made in a lab. I don't think it came from outer space. But the science for it definitely could have come from anywhere. Who really knows? this is research. This was first released in 1979. The genome hadn't even been cracked yet, according to what they told us. So obviously the genome was cracked long before they let that out. They're already modifying genetically, mixing the four, types of life before they even have the genomes figured out. I don't think so. So in this Morgellons, which is actually called CBL-001 FOMA SP period, and then in brackets, pleospora. Now, it's my understanding that the FOMA SP pleospora, that is a black cup fungus, okay? And there are 10 other substrains of the silent superbug. So they didn't just stop mixing it with this. They wanted to mix it with this and that and this and that. One of these substrains is mixed with Fusarium SPP. That's another deadly black fungus. These two funguses, both of them, were both used in research in the war on drugs. And also the United Nations was involved, actually involved. Now, we know there was no war on drugs. That was just a big charade. So there was no research into the war on drugs. The research was to make a biological deadly weapon using these deadly funguses under the guise of research for the war on drugs. And they tried to test these substances in South America and in other countries, and they would not allow it. It's that deadly. So they can't say that there were not experiments with slime molds. Slime molds are basically the basis of all life. I was fascinated with life on Mars. And everybody says there's never been any life on Mars. He says there's life on Mars to this very day. There's a lawsuit in the United States right now, unless it's been dismissed or something. A man is suing NASA for hiding the fact that there's life on Mars. And it came up in the Mars rover photos. There was a substance that was identified as, guess what? A cyanobacteria, a slime mold. And so he was doing this lawsuit. This is a major cover-up, a major discovery, life on Mars, cyanobacteria, which is a slime mold. Now, the thing about why is Morgellons so hard to kill? Okay, slime molds are the thing where life starts. They're like the first part of life. They can survive extreme heat and extreme cold temperatures. So you can't kill it with heat and you can't kill it with cold. It's like the basis of all life. So if you were going to modify a human being, you're probably going to look at cyanobacteria, aren't you? And also, if you're going to program a human being, turn that human being into a cyborg robot that you can operate and give instructions to like a computer, you're going to look at a slime mold. So that is the gist of the bulk of my research has led me to here. And the other thing, the main thing that I want to make an appeal for on your show, Alfred, because I know you have a huge following, you're very highly respected in the movement for the truth and for disclosure. And there has to be people that are speaking out for the patients. The patients are and I know this personally, and I have witnessed that it happens to other patients as well. They are cast right out of their families. They're cast out of their social networks, because when anybody goes to Google and they key in Morgellons, they come up with some crazy mental illness that the doctors have actually fabricated to label these patients. And there are many of them. There's not just one. Whatever they can come up with, they actually stage manage the appointments in order to arrive at a predetermined conclusion. And the patients have lost children. They have had their marriages destroyed because the husband or wife doesn't believe them. They're no longer invited to family functions and events. They cannot get disability insurance for Morgellons from their workplace because it doesn't exist. There's no little box to put it in. There is no such diagnosis. So the only way that a patient can get disability coverage is by having one of these other things, such as arthritis or fibromyalgia or chronic fatigue syndrome. So you are given a mental illness diagnosis. I know of one man from Victoria who I was in an exercise group with. We were both, him and his wife, and me and another person were in Portland a couple of years before I came ill with this. About 3 years after I got this, he got this. About another 3 years later or 4 years later, his wife got it. So sometimes it takes a long, long time. But he told me the story of, and this is an intelligent man, he was a counselor. That was his job. And for many years, respected, went back and forth from Canada to the United States. As soon as he got the Morgellons diagnosis, he was no longer allowed to cross the border. Okay? Not only that, his doctor told him the absolute only way he was going to get disability insurance from his job is he had to agree that he had one of these mental illnesses, or he just wouldn't get it. So they're faced with absolute poverty. They can't go and get prescriptions under their medical plan because there aren't prescriptions for something that doesn't exist. So you can't go in your doctor and say, well, I'd like an anti-parasite or I'd like an antifungal. And he said, well, I do the diagnosis first and then I give you the prescription. It doesn't work like this. In Canada, you cannot get a medical test without a doctor's note. So after I was thrown out of a medical clinic and refused treatment, a walk-in clinic, when I thought I had flesh-eating disease, okay, my arm literally looked like it. And it was my understanding that you could die within like 24 hours if you had flesh-eating disease. I was literally thrown out of the clinic. I was frantic, okay? Well, there happened to be a medical laboratory a few doors down. So I ran into the lab and I said, I need some tests. I think I have this flesh-eating disease and I'm like, I can't get the doctor. She said, look, you got to get a note from the doctor. I said, I was just there. He won't even look at me. And you know what the reason he wouldn't look at me was because I'd already had been to a different doctor like the week before or something, and I had been referred to a specialist, and that appointment was like 3 months away. And I thought I had flesh-eating disease. When you are treated like that and you realize there's absolutely no possible way that you're going to get any help, you can't get a diagnosis, you're thrown out of your family, you can't work anymore, you can't get any medicine you need without buying it yourself or sending online to some fish aquarium store to get your antibiotics. People go to veterinarians to get medicine they should be getting from their doctors. Okay. And so I want to get the word out. I want people to stop treating Morgellons patients like they're crazy. And I want them to realize this technology exists. We're not making it up. It's all over the place. And they're not immune to this. Anybody can get it. And if people think that, oh, well, I can't get that. I have such a healthy diet. I've had such a healthy lifestyle. The majority of patients that have got this were very healthy before they got this. Were active in the community, were working people, had good families, just like the rest of people. And
Is there any profile?
Pardon?
Is there any Morgellons profile?
What does a profile mean?
Meaning that if you have this profile, you're apt to get Morgellons.
Not that I know of.
For example, it could be tied to childhood sexual abuse. It could be tied to DNA. It could be tied to a history of XYZ in your family. It could be tied to whatever. Have they found any profile?
Not that I know of. Now, one has to realize that there is no mainstream research going on in regard to Morgellons. There is none. There probably never will be. Okay. The research that is going on, first of all, Clifford Carnicom's, for the most part, he's used all his own money. The amount of money that is required to do the appropriate research is not available unless you are in the mainstream. And if the mainstream doesn't want this found out, there's not any money.
Now, could I ask you this? I know that one of the organizations that I've been active as a consultant in deals with the area of remote neural weapons. It's the European Coalition Against Covert Harassment. And it's very tangential to the Morgellons area. It's ucatch.org. Is there a Morgellons patients group that exists?
There are numerous. Well, first of all, the Oklahoma State University years ago began the collection of the names of people who felt that they were affected by this disease or infection or whatever you want to call it. I was actually one of the first people to register with the Oklahoma State University. And there was a Morgellons Research Foundation that began, and it was a Randy Wymore from the Oklahoma State University. And I believe the lady that started the foundation may have been a lady by the name of Mary Liato or something like that. I'm not certain, but they sort of parted ways. Okay, they sort of parted ways. And it was called it is now called the Charles Holman Research Foundation. And I think actually they're having their annual get-together this year. So they kept an initial log of the patient's names and contacts. However, they stopped. Okay, this is a lot of work to keep track of these things. And these people, a lot of them are working on a volunteer basis. So for whatever reason, they stopped collecting the names of the patients. And to this day, I don't think that there is a log of patients, of all of the patients. Now, on the original Silent Superbug blog spot, there was a tracking thing for the people that visited the website, the disclosure. And I actually recorded and read all of those names of the people who were frequenting that website. And it was all government and health people. They know all about this. They know all about the cover up. So with regard to this having to do with controlling a human being remotely, absolutely, this has to do with it as well. Are you okay, Alfred?
No, I'm fine. While you're talking, I'm just looking up things online.
Okay.
Because what I'm trying to do is get an idea to communicate to people the epidemiology of it. How many people are we talking about worldwide? Do you?
Well, the last, there was another man that had a website as well. I don't have that on the tip of my tongue, and that website is no longer going. Now that, I'm going to have to go back 5-7 years with that, and the number was about 30,000 families at the time. Okay.
Here it says, here's one, 14,000 people have Morgellons disease. That was April 29th. It says 14,000 people have Morgellons disease, but CDC says it doesn't exist. That's one article. And it was, the term Morgellons was coined by a woman named Mary Laytow, whose son contracted a strange lesion on his lip.
Yeah. Yeah, and prior to that, it was named silent superbug. It was also fiber disease. So it does go by a few different names, chemtrail sickness. But it seems to me that the purpose of this is trying to play around with the like God and trying to make a better human, okay? Because I've heard that there's many things out there, the scientist who made this, and he thought he was doing some good and it was going to help people and all this stuff. Well, that's sometimes the worst people in the world are people that try to help and they'll end up making a big nightmare like this, right?
Now, do you mind if I ask you some questions?
No, go right ahead.
Okay. Is one theory that Morgellons is transmitted by nanobots in chemtrails?
I would think that it is transmitted through chemtrails. Whether nanobots specifically are involved, I can't say for sure. Okay, exactly what you would have smart dust. You have smart dust. You have these fibers which can self-assemble from dust. Okay, these fibers are microscopic and nano-sized, but they also are several feet long. Okay, they're not just tiny little things. And as you're studying this under the microscope, you soon realize that you don't need a high magnification. What you're seeing at high magnification, you can see at low. You only need 10 times magnification, Mike.
Well, here's one question that I have. In the course of the studies regarding the implantation of humanity via chemtrails, one of the current figures is that over 80% of humanity has been implanted via nanobot implants from chemtrails that have been breathed in by humans in urban populations that have been chemtrailed, that go into the bloodstream, jump the blood-brain barrier, and are then entrained within the brain and can be activated by banks of supercomputers and mind control software transmitters like HAART. but that 80%, it's not that 80% of humans' implants have been activated yet. They've just been implanted. If we had 80% activated, 80% of humans would be robots right now. So, and the question is, are we on the road to that or not? Now, it seems to me, I'm building up to the question. I know it's a huge amount of suffering, but it seems to me that 14,000 is a very low number. I was expecting something like 1% of the human population. Mm-hmm. So my question is, why is the number so low? I know that it's a large number, and I know that Morgellons is a scourge and is part of the transhumanist agenda, and why is the number so low?
I heard that it was activated by frequency. Sound frequency is what I heard. So, for example, the radio frequencies.
Yeah.
So I heard it could be activated by that. So I can't tell you for certain why some people are exhibiting symptoms and other people are not.
So that it could be, and I'm just getting out of speculation, but this is on the basis of, for example, I was first hit by directed energy weapons at the inner ring of the Pentagon in October of 1977. So I've been targeted for now over 40 years, or almost 40 years, okay? So I've been, on this case for a long time. And so, and I've been tracking the controllers of the transhumanist agenda, both 3D, 4D, for a long time. And it seems to me that it may be the case that Morgellons may be like a test, and that accounts for the small numbers, and that, versus the nanobots that they're going with the trying to activate 80% of, that is, they're going for the large numbers, and that the Morgellons they threw out as a test, and only 14,000, because they're psychopathic, so they don't care about the suffering. It's just, for them, it's just a case. We're talking about the Air Force is involved, all Air Forces, Canadian Air Force, American Air Force, all the agencies, NSA, CIA, DIA, CSIS, all of them. It's just psychopathic government. They're all psychopaths because they're run by non-human agencies.
Yeah.
Now, and so that they just did a test on Morgellons, and if they did more frequencies, you could have a Morgellons planet, but they decided not to extend it. Either that, or there's a lot more Morgellons sufferers than 14,000, and that number is being contained through information warfare. That could also be the case, because you have a spectrum from fibromyalgia all the way up. And you follow me? I.e., the distance between fibromyalgia and Morgellons could just be a spectrum of frequencies. Do you follow what I'm saying?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
And so you could have, like, the whole planet is maybe on sub-fibromyalgia frequencies, and then they get a whole bunch of people up to fibromyalgia, and then they're just waiting to really get up into 2015 or 2016, and then to put on the frequency burners from their point of view, and then wipe out everybody with Morgellons. I mean, from a depopulation point of view. I'm just speculating here. I'm trying to see them as the gas chamber operators, and whether Morgellons is a form of Zyklon B, of their depopulation agent. And so what are they doing with it?
Okay, I could tell
Yeah,
you something.
I'm just getting into the mindset of these controllers. Does what I'm saying make sense to you? I'm trying to look
Well,
at.
I think that we have to. I do have a lot of thoughts on this, and hopefully I can remember them all.
Yeah.
That's one problem with Morgellons patients. First of all, if I go back to some of the possible causes, I can go back to Barbara Marciniak's books. They came out, I believe it was in the late 70s, I believe, or early 80s. And in there, she said we were going to be implanted with light encoded filaments and that this was going to be changing us, okay? Well, that's exactly what Morgellons is, light encoded filaments, okay?
Yeah, but
Light
it's
encoded
not constant.
filaments.
It's terminal.
And so it is altering us. She said it was going to alter us, so I can go back to there. Okay, another thing that happened was the Grey Goose scenario. That was early 1980s. The Falkland War, early 1982. We had another lady. I don't know if you heard of her. It was a young woman, a new age person who was involved in a cult, a cult called themselves Destiny, Destiny. There was a young lady on there who was channeling what she called demons. Okay, she called them demons herself. And one of the channeled messages, she was asked about this. Okay, and what she said was this was like to establish a network. Okay, and it was a mistake. Instead of it being on the inside, it landed up on the outside. Okay, so what should have been inside the body landed up like in the skin instead of in the body. So maybe, Morgellons patients are the ones who it didn't work on, and the other ones aren't having any symptoms because it's inside their body and
I
not visible on the outside. So that's one theory, a couple of different theories there.
Okay, could I ask you,
Yeah.
carrying that speculation, the Morgellons patients that have the Morgellons on the externally that you can see them have certain symptoms. What symptoms would the Morgellons patients who have it on the inside have?
Well, every Morgellons patient that has it on the outside also has it on the inside. That's
Right.
one thing I can tell you. And so what the patients, it'll be the very same symptoms. Now, before I go into the symptoms, I do want to say one thing when it has to do with the numbers of patients. Now, one has to understand that Morgellons is not, you can't go in and get a diagnosis of Morgellons like you can cancer. If you went in and you said, I got a problem in my liver, and the doctor checked out and he said, you got liver cancer, right? It's pretty simple. You don't have symptoms all over your body from top to bottom in every single part of your body. It's completely systemic. So as people are getting symptoms, they're going to go to the doctor and say, there's something wrong with my eyes. The doctor's not going to come to the conclusion he has Morgellons, and neither is the patient. Next month, the guy's going to say, there's something wrong with my nose. He's going to go to a nose doctor, and on and on and on and on. So it's not until you've been going through this for about 10 years, okay, and finally the doctor says, I think you're a hypochondriac. You're always in here every 2 seconds. You can't possibly be that sick. You can't possibly have this many symptoms unless you have a systemic illness. They test you for all the systemic illnesses and nothing comes up. Well, you've got to be crazy then, right? So the reason you're not getting the numbers of patients, you'd have to include everybody that had an eye problem, everybody that felt they had lesion in their nose, everybody who had throat problems, everybody who had lung problems.
Yeah. Now let me ask you a question. I met recently the newly appointed director of the fibromyalgia unit at Children's Hospital in Vancouver, and he's really, really a very advanced doctor.
Okay,
And I have a mind to send him a copy of our interview
that'd be fine.
with a suggestion that he make an appointment for you.
That would be fine, but I won't honestly waste my time unless I think it's worth my while, with regular doctors.
No, but
You
wait.
know?
But this guy is outside of the box.
Well, if he's what you say he is,
No. I mean, I'm just kind of trying to bridge worlds here.
okay, that would be fine,
Yeah. Because I've had many conversations with him
Mhm.
because he's a person who opened up the Canadian medical system to fibromyalgia,
Oh, okay.
which is pretty awesome in itself. And now he has an integrated fibromyalgia unit, which includes acupuncturists, all kinds of different people. Okay. And I've had in-depth conversations with him
Mhm.
on the fibromyalgia issue, and a lot of different things. And he has copies of my books, Exopolitics. He has copies of my books, The Dimensional Ecology, and he knows my
Mhm.
dimensional work. Okay. And he has a multidimensional mind. So I'm trying to make inroads here.
Mhm.
You follow what I'm saying? I'm trying to make an inroad into the medical system here.
I
And
can tell you one inroad.
what's the worst that can happen? It's just a trip down to Vancouver, right?
Oh, I can tell you I can tell you this. I suffer to this very day from the effects of iatrogenic neglect psychologically. And I actually fear getting
Iatrogenic
rejected.
neglect.
I fear getting rejected. I fear getting having a stage managed appointment. I
Okay.
fear coming out with a mental illness diagnosis, and I fear getting emotionally hurt. And that's the honest to God truth.
Yeah. Okay. Uh, yeah. I mean, okay. Well, that's fine. I was just testing the waters
Mhm.
to see if we could make some medical history here.
I think that we might be able to, and I'll just tell you something about my diagnoses. So, way back in approximately 2004, 2003, it was 2003, I received a diagnosis of severe osteoarthritis and also fibromyalgia.
Right.
One of the things that I have with the osteoarthritis is these big nodules on my thumbs and my fingers. Okay.
Right.
And these showed up on x-rays, full body scan, and all of that in various different places in my body. And I got the fibromyalgia diagnosis, which is just a label for a systemic illness for which they don't think they know a cause. Well, over the years of treating the pain that comes from having Morgellons, and people hardly ever talk about the amount of pain that you have with this. It's off the charts. What you've got going on is a white matter, which is waxy, like plastic wax mixed with plastic, mixed with what looks like metals, sparkles in it, infiltrated deep within your flesh. I can assure you that is causing the pain in fibromyalgia patients. It's deeply embedded in the skin. The pain is coming from this, which think of a deep mycosis, a deep fungal type infection, or a deep infection that goes deep into the flesh, but it's not visible. You can't see it because the color of it mixes in with the flesh. So those of us that are, we could call ourselves the old timers here who've been going on. The longest patient I know of, and her memory goes back basically to 1979. I can go back to early 1982, insect bite, but there was not supposed to be any Lyme disease. I come from Saskatchewan. I got bit by an insect there. It gets 40 below in the winter. There's not supposed to be any Lyme disease there. And so I think that many of us patients got affected by more than one release. We also could possibly have more than one substrain. If we are susceptible more than other people due to our genetics, maybe someone should check our genetics, right? But you think you can get your genetics tested by a specialist doctor in Canada? It ain't possible. You go into a doctor and say, I think my DNA's been altered. I'd like to get it checked. The doctor say, crazy person, we got to give him some mental illness diagnosis here. I went to a doctor with 3 specialists, and I was so afraid of him. I literally ran out of his office. The appointment was so stage managed, and all of these doctors are in Victoria, British Columbia. Okay.
Well, that's a known ritual abuse capital.
You can tell me about it. The courtroom is full of witches and warlocks.
Yes.
And the whole island is full of witches and warlocks. Trust me. Victoria, I'm so glad to be off that island. You have no idea.
Yeah. Victoria and Vancouver Island is a known ritual abuse capital of British Columbia and Canada.
Yeah. Many people ask me if I think I got Morgellons because I was targeted, because I blew the whistle on HSBC.
Okay. Now we're getting somewhere because I'm looking at the resume of Marcia Pavlis and at your professional career history. And you are, first of all, investment advisor, HSBC Securities, manager, investment services, HSBC Bank Canada, manager of the Saskatoon Financial Center, the Imperial Life Assurance Company of Canada, financial services manager, Bank of Montreal, assistant branch manager, Bank of Montreal. Your education is superior. And I said to myself, this is a fast-track person who is ethical at the same time.
Absolutely.
And somewhere along the line, because I know it happened to me, I became a whistleblower many times along my career, and I self-ejected from Wall Street. I self-ejected from government because it's impossible to stay in those toxic environments. So do you have a similar story?
Well, as I said, I can tell you that I became ill in the early 80s. I first noticed chemtrails in the year 2000, and during the year 1999 to 2000 and the year before, I walked to and from work in Victoria, British Columbia, and the rain was very slimy and extremely sparkly. I couldn't even drive at night. I got a vaccination from HSBC. But this is before I blew the whistle on them. They were giving the flu vaccinations to the staff. It was a regular thing that they did. And so that would have been in the year 1999, like late in the year. Okay. I became ill in about January or February of 2000. Okay. And I first had a bit of a fall. I slipped on that sparkly rain. And in front of the bank where I was working, I smashed my shoulder into a metal bar. And from there, I developed a frozen shoulder, which I had for about 5 years in one or the other shoulders. And I started to go to all these doctors. And as I was going to these doctors, I started talking about other symptoms. Like, how are you today? You've got this or that. And the actual whistle blowing didn't occur until 2002. Okay.
And what exactly was the nature of your whistleblowing?
And we could even have a full show on that some other time, because that
Well,
is
just chip it.
okay. Well, it was a massive breach of trust against Canadian investors, which occurred at HSBC Investment Management. This has to do with not mutual funds, but this was for the higher profile clients, the more wealthier clients, and it was managed portfolios. And the clients filled out, of course, the Know Your Client form. The portfolios were designed, the clients were informed of the parameters of the contract, and the parameters were disregarded, and the risk to particular portfolios was greatly increased. So I had several clients in this product, and I had an elderly client in one of these. She had not authorized it. The risk was way too high for this client. And it was, she noticed it right away. She's quite a wise English lady and a rich, wealthy lady. And she said, the language she used, they're running high and loose with my money, basically. And so I am an ethical person. I don't, as a rule, try to lie. I have a really hard time with that. I had agreed to, in my profession, a certain parameter of ethics. I had guidelines that I agreed and signed that I would follow. And for following and doing exactly what my employer and the regulators who licensed, not only my license as an investment advisor, but my license as a certified financial planner, my license as an associate of the Institute of Canadian Bankers, okay? It went against everything. I went to the bank manager and reported the crime. The bank owns the securities firm I worked for. The bank owns the asset management company I reported. And I used to work for the bank. Okay? And within a month after I had reported the crime, my properties were being seized by the bank. I could go on and on. So were they out to destroy me? You can bet they were. Absolutely.
And
I haven't recovered since. Do you know, since I left my employment, in the last 10 years, the amount of income that I have has not exceeded my income in the year 2000. That's how badly I've been destroyed.
now, dated from that whistleblower, can you date the Morgellons symptoms from that whistleblower? Is there any correlation between?
I can only tell you this thing. As far as the very bad lesions, which I've got makeup on, but a continual problem with on my face, okay? When I was in the midst of my trial, okay, and 19
What trial?
trial, my
Sorry.
constructive dismissal trial, which I started after my constructive dismissal from my employer after I blew the whistle.
I see.
Okay, in 2004, I moved back to Victoria because I wanted to pursue that lawsuit. And it started about 2005, so about 5 years I was in the court. That is when the major breakout on my face happened. So every day when I had to go to court, when I was in the courthouse, and I was in the courthouse a lot, photocopying for hours and hours on end. I had to go into the courthouse with Morgellons lesions all over my face. So I can't tell you whether it is or it isn't, okay? I don't know if I'm a targeted person. I do know that they wanted to destroy me. I don't think they wanted to kill me, because if they would have wanted to kill me, I would be dead already, okay?
Well,
So,
it seems that you are a targeted person. If you have Morgellons, you're a targeted individual, number one. And number two, you certainly seem to be targeted by your former employer, HSBC, who took unethical behavior toward you when you did a perfectly ethical act.
that's absolutely right.
So, I mean, how much more targeted can you get than that?
Well, yeah, I don't disagree with that, but did HSBC give me Morgellons, or are they responsible for triggering it? We know that the courts are in bed with these banks. I can swear they are so cozy in bed, it would make your hair stand on end.
Oh, yeah. I mean, Look, we got a back channel report that this was last June. We got June of 2014. We got a back channel report that the orders had come down from the Obama White House through HSBC to foreclose on the mortgage of the landlord that had rented our house in Vancouver, BC, rented us his house, Vancouver, BC, for 10 years. We had a household of 11 people, including a family with 2 children in school, a bunch of animals, a really nice collective household because of my activities. Fortunately, we were able to find a better, cheaper house that we're in now.
Yeah.
Because of spirit. That's what I think is happening. But HSBC targeted me. Why should they target you?
Well, I can tell you this much. I proved, okay, not only did I prove that they stole some of my compensation, but I also proved that they gave it to another investment advisor, okay? And the fact, the judge, the final decision was so unbelievably amazing, but every single person involved in this court case, and there's a lot, and that would be a whole other show, okay?
You see, this is like advanced fascism. And that is that you have all the window dressing of the USA Corporation and the Canada Corporation and all the governments. And then when you have people that are inconvenient, they say, well, get them target them with this, and then and then they just target you with Morgellons. They get you with all kinds of stuff. They get you with frequency weapons.
Yeah.
I mean, I've had to fend off all kinds of, quote, medical stuff that was induced by frequency weapons, and I've just had to, get my body up and fend off those frequency weapons that were diagnoses and then went nowhere. I mean, over the past 17 years, let's say, over the past 40 years, I've had directed energy weapons aimed at me. And one of those things is to induce illnesses, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But they're pseudo illnesses because they try to mimic all these illnesses inside of you.
Right, yeah.
So then you have to know that you have to change your frequency to get that off, but sometimes you can't. So sometimes it manifests as Morgellons, but it's all like a fascistic system because it's where crony capitalism works with, the weapons that they aim at the civilians, and if they're dissenters or people who look at, they just go, they call it, hey, Joe, aim, like
Yeah.
they used to do income tax checks. Well, now they just aim frequency weapons at you. So it's that type of thing. It's this murky, amoral, empire of chaos.
I can.
That's what they've created. And so I'm just trying to get a picture out there that it seems like Morgellons is one of those things. The great puzzle is why it's only 14,000. That's
Well, and I think it is actually a lot more. Like I said,
probably a lot more.
we can identify people with it ourselves by looking at patterns on people's skin.
Yeah.
And if we say to them, "Oh, gee, you look like you can have Morgellons. I see that sort of like white stuff there and the sort of blue marks," and they'll go, "Oh no, that's not that. I got something else. It's just the way my skin is." So you were asking about the internal symptoms, and there are internal symptoms. First of all, the lungs there's something that you cough up every day, which is very horrendous
Wow.
and is very irritating. And it's really hard to tell if it's in the lungs or a little higher than the lungs or where it is, but it's in that area. Your heart is affected. And the reason that your heart is affected is that this waxy, plastic-like plaque also lines the arteries of the heart. It's a plaque, okay? So you have to take
Can't
something.
that plaque be seen on any?
Well, it's the typical type of, would show up as a typical plaque that you would have if you had heart disease. But with Morgellons patients, it's altered. It's more like a plastic, okay? So this is just me, okay? We have this plaque everywhere, okay? The morning we wake up, we've got this gooey, waxy plaque in the corner of our eyes. It's in the corners of my lips all day long. I'm wiping this stuff off my lips. The plaque is everywhere in the body. It's plaque, okay? And so obviously the plaque is in the heart. So a lot of people are having heart symptoms. They feel like they're going to have a heart attack, okay? So they got to take an enzyme to get the plaque out of the heart. There's different things that you want to do.
Well, those are medical system symptoms,
yeah,
and effects that physicians can see.
Yeah,
that
they don't relate that to Morgellons. They'll just say you have heart disease, okay? Same thing if you go and you've got goop in your eyes, they say, well, I don't know why you got the goop in your eyes. It's something from the environment or, they never, and that's the thing about the medical establishment, and I'm sure you know that it is also part of the control mechanism.
Exactly.
And one of the control mechanisms, and it started in Victoria when I was living there, was that because we have this government-sponsored healthcare, okay, if you went into a doctor properly as a Morgellons patient, you would go into that doctor and you would tell him every single symptom you have had and for how long, and you would be in that doctor's office for a good portion of his time that day. And he would be very annoyed with you because he's not making hardly any money on you and he's got all these other patients waiting. So because they want these doctors to be profitable, right? Only one symptom is allowed to be discussed with the doctor at a time. That's what they did in Victoria. So you go to the doctor and you say, okay, I got this goop in my eye. Next time you go back, got to make another appointment. I got to feel like I'm having a heart attack. Next time, I'm having trouble with my bowels. I got pain in my stomach area. It feels like I've got kidney problems. I'm having a problem with my liver. Every time you go, you got to have a new appointment. Then guess what they do? They write it in your chart. Patient making numerous appointments, running from doctor to doctor. Hypochondriac. You're not allowed to have more than one symptom. If you got more than one symptom, there must be something else wrong with you, right? And so I do have a document. It's 5-word pages of my symptoms that I've had since I got this. So that is why the majority of patients are not diagnosed with Morgellons, number one reason is not in the doctor's medical diagnosis book. It does not exist. You cannot go to the doctor and get a diagnosis of Morgellons. And that is the truth. No doctor can get paid by any insurance company for giving you a diagnosis of Morgellons or for treating you for Morgellons. The doctor wants to get paid, so he's got to put that you have something else. And that's what he does. I counseled this patient. She was very distraught. I advised her to relax, $100, and I got every single one of my medical records. And I can tell you, the doctors lie on your chart. They lie about what you said, and they conspire with one another. And you want to know how they do it? Cell phone. The doctors now have a cell phone. You go into the appointment. Oh, let me talk to so-and-so. I'll just phone up the BC Medical. Oh, you hear anything about something called Morgellons, silent superbug, could be bioterrorism? Oh, no, you haven't heard anything? Hear anything from the CDC in the U.S.? No, didn't hear anything. Well, I guess the patient must be crazy. Out you go. That's what they do. And so the medical, people don't know this, but every doctor in Canada belongs to the same medical insurance company if they get sued, okay, for medical malpractice. Do you have any idea how powerful that company must be? I worked in the insurance industry. I know how insurance works. It's all statistical. And so the insurance company makes certain that no lawsuits get past the filing stage. They go into court. They are in bed with these judges just the same as anything else. And they make certain that none of these lawsuits go ahead. There was another lawsuit, some guy on Vancouver Island had started at a targeted individual, and it didn't go anywhere. They just treated him so terribly. I myself, right now, right behind my ear here, I may have been implanted. And when, in early 2002, I had multiple surgeries. I had surgery for melanoma, and the specialist took something out here to put a little patch on my nose temporarily. Didn't make any sense because I was having major surgery on my nose in a few weeks. And ever since then, I have this rice-sized hard thing right there. Well, if he just took skin and did a couple little stitches, why is it hard? Why is it hard like a piece of rice? So it's possible, okay? It's very possible that I could have been implanted, and that as well was before I blew the whistle. However, I want to say that it was the incident that occurred that I blew the whistle on actually occurred the year before, in 2001, okay? And in 2001, I went on disability. I said I got really ill in the year 2000. By 2001, I was on disability for those symptoms. And while I was away sick, I was called in for surgery. I was waiting for prolapse surgery. I had 3 different surgeries with regard to that. And right after that, I was diagnosed with melanoma on my nose, and I had 7 surgeries for that, like 2 major ones and the rest were minor. And so there was so much going on with me that it's a lot. There was a lot that happened.
No, I hear. I didn't mean to get us off track. Now, we've got about 15 minutes left in this segment, and I just wanted to make sure that you're going to communicate everything that you want to communicate. So what would you like to cover in these remaining 15 minutes?
Well, I think the main thing is probably just to go over the points that we have covered.
Okay.
That there is a cover-up. The CDC is involved. And the lady at the top is Julia Gerberding. and she should be investigated, okay, regarding what happened in 2004. And also, the silent superbug videos should be studied by somebody knowledgeable in proteome and genome science, and also the gene sequence, which I have, I can easily provide it to anybody, should be actually looked at in relation to some of the actual physical Morgellons patient samples to compare it and see if this gene sequence is a match. Okay, it would certainly save an awful lot of time if we could just prove that this gene sequence that was already provided is exactly the one that we need. And if so, based upon that genetic alteration and it actually altering our bodies, because what they did, I didn't mention this, Alfred, is they have injected genes of a insect, a parasite, a bird, an actual bird, a mammal, a higher primate, and another human being. They actually inserted genes of these types of creatures into this man-made microorganism. So the Morgellons matter, the Morgellons fibers, because they have received a gene code that says you're a bird, it tries to make a bird, but it doesn't have the genetic material to do that. So you will find fibers that look like feathers. Why? Because it's the genes of a bird were inserted. Also, these spots, very different colors of spots, they also inserted the genes of a Lepidoptera, which is a butterfly or a moth. And that is where you get the different various spots like you have on a butterfly or on a moth. So people aren't crazy when they say they see insects or that. It's not a real insect. It's not a real parasite. It's something that has crossed the domains of life. You couldn't identify it and say, that's a plant, right? But there's many things look like a plant, that look like roots, that look like fine little roots on a plant. And there's not one kind of fiber. There are many, many fibers involved in Morgellons, not one. So we have to think of something that is living and picks up genes from other things as it goes and modifies the DNA as it goes, and it is modifying the DNA of us. And that is what we need, I believe, in order for us to get better, somebody that is familiar with this type of technology. And we know that there are a lot of people that could possibly help us. J. Craig Venter, who created, according to him, the first man-made microorganism. I'm going to say no, it wasn't, but whatever. This one came along before the one that he came out with, you know. And so the science is there. Now, if you were making something a weapon of war and you were researching that weapon of war and creating it under the guise of a war on drugs, right? And it got out and it escaped a few times and caused an environmental disaster, are you going to tell people about it? Are you going to admit to it? No, because you were doing this not for a war on drugs. Okay? And if you were doing this kind of research for the good of man, you should have been more careful with it. So why were you messing around with these black cup funguses in the first place that are absolutely deadly? Okay, and mixing them with other things.
So you're saying that Morgellons could have been a bioweapon that either intentionally or unintentionally was released into the human environment.
It's absolutely possible. Definitely.
Yeah, and there's precedent for that because when we did Ebola-gate, looking at the way that the Ebola vaccine and the Ebola itself has been weaponized, it was developed as a bioweapon. And the same thing with AIDS. Back in the 70s, it was developed as a bioweapon at Fort Detrick, Maryland. So, you know, Morgellons could have been developed as a bioweapon and then either released intentionally, oh, well, let's put it out and see what we do. These people are psychopaths.
Yeah, they are. And the scientists that reported this and was talking about these substances that they were messing around with. And then, like I said, after I did the research into that, and you come up with this ridiculous things like, why is the United Nations? You know, I was just mortified to think that the United Nations might be involved in this, actually, you know.
The United Nations is about genocide and depopulation.
And so, you know, it makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
And so, you know, there's the main thing is this. Whoever has done this, the science is there, okay? If you've done this type of science, you can undo it. That's my opinion. And they know they can undo it. But in order to undo it, they'd have to admit they made it, right?
Yeah, and that's all caught up in military secrecy and all that. So.
Oh, and I was going to mention another thing in the 70-page document, which I will share with you if you want it, from all of the scientists' postings, okay, he talks in that document about the Ebola virus as well. And he also talks, there's a lot of information on the cover-up of autism and vaccinations, and by, I forget the name of the Kennedy, but it's one of the Kennedys, and this goes back 30 years.
Sure.
And it's like they allowed all those children to get autism to cover this up.
Yeah.
And they're still doing it today. So yeah, we're collateral damage. We're being used to experiment on. And it's about time that this stopped. And the only way we're going to stop it is to stand up for ourselves and get the word out and hold
accountability forward. Here comes accountability.
Yes.
Along with a positive timeline.
That's
okay. Right. Well, how can people access your knowledge? We're going to put all of your links, your YouTube channels, your research, your news articles. We'll put all of that access. And how can people contact you? And do you want people to contact you, or should they just go to your YouTube channels?
If people are looking for Morgellons symptoms support, I have started recently a Facebook group. It is called exactly that, Morgellons Symptoms Support. However, there are many other much better support groups out there. One is on a website called Lyme Busters, and they have a Morgellons section, and they have an awful lot of research. And so it's a wealth of information. There are other more technical, if people want more technical support groups, more into the science, I know of groups that do that. If people want to contact me personally about Morgellons, they should, before they do that, they should seek out support groups, because I'm only one person and I only have my own experience. But there's a wealth of help from other Morgellons patients on these support groups. And so don't panic. There is help there. Go to a support group and get in there with it. And you got a big learning curve, and you should get in there, and those patients are going to help you more than any doctor. I have the YouTube channel, which is Morgellons Cover Up, and I have over 800, I think over 600 videos on there. Many of them are of actual moving fibers. Many of them are of microscopic images, LED and otherwise, which I've taken all myself. A lot of my own experiments with different things on myself. So with regard to Morgellons, that's
Oh, we just lost you. Hello? 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 We lost your sound. We lost your sound. We lost your sound. Okay. Can you correct your sound? Okay.